Now it's time for a recipe fit for a queen, Battenberg cake. This is a pink and white checkerboard cake that's wrapped in marzipan. And I'll start by sifting a cup of all-purpose flour. You can do this in a large mixing bowl with electric beaters, or you can use a stand mixer. So first I'll sift this. I remember the first time I had Battenberg cake was at high tea with my good friend Lisa. We were all dressed up, and honestly, eating those slices of checkerboard cake, we felt like we were 10 years old again. I'll add to that a cup of sugar and half a cup of ground almonds. Half a teaspoon of baking powder and a quarter teaspoon of salt. So I just give this a little stir at the bottom of the bowl just to combine the ingredients. Now it's time for the butter. You can measure the butter by volume, which would be 3/4 of a cup, or you can weigh it, and it's 6 ounces. My butter is at room temperature, and I just break it into pieces as I add it to the bowl. Go. With the paddle attachment, I'll mix this on medium speed, fully working in the butter. I'm making a cake batter, not a pie dough, so you don't want to see too many visible pieces of butter. There we go. The mixture is a rough, crumbly texture. So now I'm ready to add the liquids. 3 eggs. 2 tablespoons of milk. And a teaspoon of vanilla extract. I'll just mix this together using a fork, just to loosen up the eggs, and add it all at once to this crumble mixture. Now first I'll mix this on low speed to blend it, and then I'll increase the speed to about medium-high and let it go for about 90 seconds to 2 minutes. That really builds in structure into the batter and aerates it so it'll be nice and fluffy. There we go. Now I have to divide the batter in half. Half remains white or an off-white color, and the other half I have to tint pink. That's the traditional Battenberg cake color. So there's 2 ways to divide your batter in half. You can measure it by volume and simply divide it in half, or since I was using my scale to measure my butter, I might as well do the same for the batter. So I have 26 ounces of batter, so 13 ounces into each of my 2 loaf pans. So I'll first start by scooping 13 ounces of the batter into 1 pan. There we go. And I spread it to level it. And now the other half, I'll tint with a little pink food coloring paste. Now a little goes a long way when you're using food coloring pastes. So start by adding just 1 little dab with a toothpick, stir it in, and see if you like the color. It does intensify as it sits. You can always add more if you want. Now, I'll put this in the second loaf pan, and both loaf pans have been greased and lined with parchment. That way it's easy to pull out the cakes after they're baked and cooled. The cakes are ready to bake. I've preheated my oven to 350, and they take about 30 minutes to bake. And I use a skewer inserted in the center of the cake. When it comes out clean, the cake is done. After these cakes have baked and cooled completely, then it's time to assemble the Battenberg cake and talk about checkerboard magic. We're gonna have some fun. Are you ready for a tea party? Well, I will be after I've assembled my Battenberg cakes. And here are those cake layers out of the oven and completely cooled. You can see that pink color stays intact. So now it's time for the fun part, assembling the checkerboard cakes and then wrapping them in the marzipan. Take both your cakes, unwrap them, and now it's time to trim them. Now, first thing I do is I square off the cake and I just trim the outside edges. I want to reveal that beautiful pink interior. So a serrated knife is best. Look at that gorgeous pink cake inside. Now I'll trim this yellow or white layer. So I cut the cake in half, then I trim away the top and the bottom. And then I cut each of those strips of cake in half again. There we go. And now for the pink. First in half, I'll trim away the outside edges. I never throw away my cake end pieces. I dry them and grind them up, and then I use the cake crumbs to line cake pans or even the bottom of a pie shell before I put in a fruit filling. A handy tool where precision is key is to use, of all things, a fabric measuring tape. I can quickly check my measurements on all of my pieces, so each of my pieces of cake are just shy of an inch. So now I know I can assemble my Battenberg cakes. To get the checkerboard pattern to stick together, I use apricot jam. So take one piece of cake and with a small offset palette knife, spread a sheer layer of the jam. And over top goes a vanilla layer. And now I just set that aside and I repeat with the other pink and then white. Now, I'll turn this flat and spread another layer of jam. And the key now is to alternate. So there we go. You've got the built-in checkerboard pattern. Now, to really add the polish, it's time to pull out that beautiful homemade marzipan. Lightly dust my work surface with a little icing sugar. Now I'll roll out the marzipan. And because I know the length of this cake is at least 8 inches, because that's the size of the pan I use to bake it, I want to roll this at least 8 inches and at least 8 inches across. So essentially a square. And you want to roll it as thin as possible. Pull out my measuring tape, and I've got ample room. Now it's time to add another layer of jam. And this is to get the marzipan to stick to the cake. And this goes on the bottom. Then I use a knife just to trim up the edges. And now I have the jam on the bottom layer, so now I can spread the jam on the other sides of the cake. And that holds that marzipan in place. All right, for the little detail, first I like to trim off a little extra. Then, kind of like wrapping a present. And this becomes, of course, the bottom of the Battenberg cake. And now I'll do the second, just like the first one. It's time to slice and get ready for a little tea party. And my tea party has a marzipan theme. I've got the cutouts, the fruitcakes, and now these lovely slices of the Battenberg cake. How could you not feel like a little kid with a bit of a checkerboard cake? It's amazing what we've accomplished all using marzipan. My favorite, though, making marzipan from scratch. It really points to the quality, and I really hope that you'll take all these ideas to your own kitchen to bake and enjoy.